Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set, cocked, locked. Here we go. Your dial is set correctly to USA Prepares. Jason is engineering the broadcast in Minnesota at Genesis Communications Network. I'm Vincent Finelli. And if you'd like to call us, we'll pay for the call, 866-582-9933, 866-582-9933. I got a message yesterday that telephone listen line is down. If that is the case, would you send me an email? Because we have a bunch of telephone listen lines associated with USA Prepares. So if you don't mind, if you would try out the one that you are most accustomed to using. And if it does not work, please email me at instructor@USAPrepares and let me know the number that's not working, please. I would appreciate that. We have one that I believe is working, 605-477-3249, 605-477-3249. Rich Scheben's with us. Welcome, Rich Scheben.
Mr. Finelli, how are you this morning?
I'm all excited. I got a package in the mail from you. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Yep. Yeah, we're probably going to eat them for lunch. We'll probably have them for lunch, but thank you very much.
You're welcome. Oh, don't get me going this early. Come on.
Rich, I will burst if I don't say this. Would you mind indulging me, please?
What do you think? Is this your show or something? Man.
Well, this is kind of important, and it's an observation I had, and it's about preparedness. I went to a gun show over the weekend, and I was really surprised at how few people were in attendance. I mean, there were cars in the parking lot, but I didn't see many people walking around. The convention hall that it was held in, I would say maybe 2/3 full on Saturday. I saw very few people walking around with long guns and pistols for sale. And by the way, that's our right to do that. The mainstream media calls that the gun show loophole. There's no loophole. If you have a rifle or a pistol or a shotgun, and you have the right to have that, if you are not a felon, you can walk into a gun show with that. They're going to want to make sure there's no ammunition in it. They're going to want to make sure that the action is tied back with a tie wrap, to make sure that it isn't going to go off accidentally. And I've been to a gun show and someone just dropped a handgun and bang, it went off. No kidding, literally. And someone was actually got a little bit of shrapnel in it when the bullet hit the floor and sprayed around. But I was there when that happened. Not this weekend, but so you can walk around with in most locations with a gun, and you can sell it. So let's say you have one that you don't want anymore, and you'd rather get something else, or you just want the cash. You can walk around with it, and you put a little for sale sign on, or you don't even have to do that. Just walk around with it, and somebody will come up to you and say, "Hey, you selling that?" Yeah. How much do you want for it? And give them the price, and they'll say, may I see it? And sure. And you hand it to them, and they look at it, and they kind of check it over for about a minute and a half, or maybe 2 minutes, maybe even a little longer, a couple more seconds than that. And if you want it, you negotiate a price, and if the price meets with your approval, then you buy it or you negotiate, and if if the negotiations work, you can pay the seller and you shake hands, and that's it. That's it. It's now yours, and to have and to hold. Well, I didn't see very many of those kind of people walking around. I didn't. I was really disappointed. I didn't see very many guests, meaning buyers. And sellers were reduced in number. And on Sunday, I don't think there were more than 20 people when I was there. I was there for about an hour. Here's what really, really disappointed me, actually upset me. For the whole show, all the tables, all the sellers, there weren't, in my opinion, more than, let's say, 20 pounds of powder for sale. It might have been a little bit more, but I'm thinking 20 pounds, 20 containers. And the sellers were selling them at about, well, for example, let's say it would normally cost $35 for a pound of reloading powder. This is to reload your own cartridges. I saw numbers like $22 on it. I thought, wow. So I asked one guy, and he said he just wanted to get rid of them. He wanted to get rid of them. That's a heck of a thing to say. I want to get rid of them. And so I said, well, how much if you buy more or all of this particular type you have there? He said 15. So normal price, 35, had it down to 22. But if you take, a bunch, 15. That's less than cost, way less than cost. And then I looked for ammunition because I was interested in what's happening in the marketplace. How many people are selling ammunition? What I saw was maybe 100 boxes of ammunition for the whole show. Very, very poor selection. And the ammo that I saw, there was one guy selling a box of, or cases of new 22s in a 500 pack at $15. 22 long rifle, high velocity, 40 grain, Remington brand, in a milk carton type container, 500 of them for $15. Extremely low price. Heck, they were selling for $75, 2 years ago. Couldn't get them. And I saw 4 people selling, walking around with guns for sale privately. There's nobody that wanted to buy the guns and hardly anybody selling the guns. I couldn't believe it. Here's my advice, class. I don't think things are getting better. I think things are getting worse. My advice is if you don't have what you need now, you ought to get it real soon. Real soon. I called a company that manufactures bullets, and I said, hey, I'd love to have one of your experts come on the air with me as every 8 weeks or so for an hour and talk about reloading. Because, and I told him a story about the show, and I said, if we don't teach people how to reload, the young people are not going to want to reload, and you won't have any customers. I reload. So here's an all-call. I'm not an expert at reloading. I know how to do it. I can talk about it. I've done it. I've experimented with different powders, different bullet weights, different cases. I've reloaded lots of rounds, but I'm not an expert. So if you think you can teach a class here on USA Prepares, let's do it. Please contact me at instructor@USAPrepares, USAPREPARES.com, and we'll teach that class. Because I think it's important, because where are you going to get the cartridges from? If I wanted to buy, 20 boxes of 20 each of 30-06, I couldn't do it at that show. If I wanted to buy 20 boxes, now we're not talking about a lot of ammunition. If I wanted to buy 20 boxes of 9mm, I couldn't do it. If I wanted to buy 20 boxes of 380 or 45, I couldn't do it. It wasn't there. And it's not like there was a rush before I got there. It wasn't there. So, word to those who are paying attention. If you think you need some handgun ammunition, if you think you need some rifle ammunition, if you think you need some shotgun ammunition, or you need the tool itself, I suggest you get on a stick and get it pronto while you still can. That's my thoughts on that. Rich Scheben, any comments?
Well, sure. Can you hear me okay, Vince, right now, by the way?
Yeah, I can hear you just fine.
Okay,
just
good.
fine.
Well, let me comment on what you just said, and then if it's okay, I'm going to dovetail this into my Economy 101 update. I'm going to pull a Sandy Cortez and say, I'm in charge. I'm in charge. Even though you worked hard and been on the air for years and paid and did the results for this, I'm going to say, I'm in charge, just like Sandy Cortez. Of course, this is a little satire, folks. But to comment on what you just said, I think it's a combination of a lot of things, Vince. First of all, some people don't want to be on the list. I think we have a lack of mentor-protege relationships where the old is not teaching balance of older skills to the youth. I think a lot of people have the guns that they want, and that's regarding your comments about the lack of people and buyers at this show. I think the people are broke. I think that when you talk about how you saw a poor selection of ammo, the first thing that came to my mind is that people, the little guy, feels that the Democrats, a.k.a. the globalists, a.k.a. anti-constitution, a.k.a. anti-law, have sold out the little people. And they don't know what to expect and what's coming next. Because it's very obvious we have a different set of rules, laws, and accountability based on what group you're in. First the aristocracy, then the serfs, then the Democrats, then the Republicans. And then everything else is based on skin pigmentation, gender, sexual orientation, etc., for the purpose of keeping people off balance, which is part of the divide and conquer strategy. So I think a lot of people, when they see things like the coup that has just attempted to take place, where the Democrats/globalists have tried to overthrow the government, and yet at the same time the Democrats call Republicans anti-government, it's beyond pot kettle. It's beyond double standards. It's beyond hypocrisy. That's why I always talk about rule of law and having practice what you preach laws. And when you look at how the FBI, CIA, DOJ, and other alphabet agencies have gone rogue, and they say they want to get rid of ICE, which is trying to reduce deaths and rapes for the little people. It's not anti-skin color. It's not anti-gender. It's not anti-sexual orientation. They're trying to protect the little people because we can't afford to have gates, fences, and security guards. So when you see the FBI, CIA, and DOJ lying under oath, misinforming federal officials like FISA judges, illegally...
Hey, hold that thought. We're going into a break. Hold that thought. We'll be right back. Rich Sheben's with us, offgridmontana.com. Rich, you were talking about something that all people in government do is on a regular basis, something that I think they naturally do, and when they get their jobs in government, they get extra training to learn how to do it better. You're talking about lying under oath. Please continue.
Yeah, well, there's an article here. FBI top lawyer thought Hillary Clinton was guilty, and basically, long story short of the article, that he felt that Hillary, amongst other FBI agents, would face charges, but Comey stopped the process. So I'm saying this in regards to the lack of people and buyers at your gun show. So people don't know, the little people, the American people, the patriots, they don't know what's going on. So when they see the FBI, the CIA, the DOJ saying that we need blood in the streets, saying that we need people to riot, and they're protecting bought and paid for fascists like Antifa to create violence, and then they see these alphabet agencies who have all this clout and power lying under oath, misinforming federal officials. FISA judges just come to mind. Illegally and unconstitutionally trying to influence the outcome of a presidential election, changing the results of people's votes by selling a fake narrative of Russian collusion. And as you know, they call this the insurance policy, where there's so much evidence that the DNC and Hillary Clinton actually paid for this Russian dossier with spies from other countries like Great Britain. At the same time, they're doing everything in their power to eliminate free speech through big tech and software like NewsGuard that's being put into every device. They're trying to do everything to eliminate the Second Amendment. Basically, we have certain people at high levels doing everything in their power to buy treason, sedition, espionage. So the little people are like, man, what the heck is going on? What happened to the rule of law? When we have a rule of law, in fact, rules, laws, and accountability based solely on what group you're in. So the people are confused, Vince. That's why I think is the main reason that there's a lack of people and buyers, along with those other things I just mentioned, at the shows, because I think people are stocked up and people are concerned. They don't want to be out there, don't want to be on the list, especially with facial recognition, and they're scared. Vince?
Yeah, one of the things we talked about previously, a few days ago, was that there was a candidate who was running for office on the West Coast for governor, and he was in this room of Democrats, and what he wanted to do was make sure he could maximize those who might be in that room and maybe even advertise toward them. So what he did was he had his people set up an electronic fence, and they tracked who was in that room with a device that was probably very much like a Stingray. That's a portable, like a suitcase, small suitcase with an antenna on it. It acts like a cell tower. So all the cell phones say, where's the tower? Oh, there's the tower. That's the closest one. And this thing simulates a cell tower. All of these smartphones and other phones gravitate and attach to that cell tower, that Stingray that looks like a cell tower, but, it's in the parking lot probably. And so they know by the unique identification of each cell phone who is there, because each cell phone has an ID, and that ID is associated with a person. Then what they did was they took it the next step further, and they cross-referenced it to PCs and tablets that person owned. So not only did they know who was in the room, everyone with a cell phone has been identified, but they cross-referenced it to the tablets, and then they sent out advertisements. So that it was like vote for Joe Dokes, your guy. That's what's happening. That's what politicians in training are doing. Now imagine when they get to office. One last thing. There was an article last week about airplanes, and they now have television screens, flat screens on the seat backs of airplanes. But that's not enough. They actually have cameras on these screens looking at you in your seat. And we know a guy who just flew, and he said, hey, there are cameras on screens. But they made an announcement that they're not using the cameras yet, but they will. We'll be right back. Rich, my concern is that people are lax in their thoughts about what they need to prepare for, and that they won't be ready. When I look out the window, I see, right now there's 11 chemtrails over the eastern sky, over the farm. Why? Has Donald Trump not been paying attention? Do they have guns to his head? Are they forcing him, I mean figuratively, maybe even literally, are they forcing him to allow the continuation of the old Barry Soetoro regime? What's going on? Why do we have these chemtrails? They've started up again. I thought, boy, this is great. We've got Donald Trump. Clear skies are here for a while. Well, it looks like we've got spraying going on again. I think things are getting worse. I don't think things are getting better. And I think there's a feeling of the mainstream media is telling everybody that good times are here to stay. No worries. The economy is booming. And I'm here to say I don't think that's the case.
Yeah. Would you like me to comment on that, Miss?
Yes, please.
Okay. I think the president, I'm still trying to stick up for him. I know he does a lot of things that are very curious to me. Trump said, and I think that's what got the deep state or the corrupt state or the powers that be, whatever you want to call them, their hackles up, because Trump said he wanted to give America back to the people. Well, let's do some of the things, I've suggested these things for years. Let's start with citizen review boards for everything, from the police to the politicians. Next, public venues for the people to speak. All the public venues are owned by the globalists, by the Democrats. And we all know that they're trying to eliminate free speech. So I would say President Trump, give half of the government venues that are out there, especially if they're taxpayer venues, they should go to both parties equally. Let's allow the people to speak, because people are waking up to all this corruption. I mean, here's an article, just 25 people show up to hear de Blasio in Iowa. Numbers show that the pension problem is way underfunded. There's so much, everything is so fixed that nothing even matters anymore. And President, he does a lot of good things. Like he said, where's the DNC server the other day? People didn't need to know where the DNC server is. There's so much fake news. This is why Kamala Harris says, I'm going to go off into a few different tangents here. Blast the pursuit of identity politics. Kamala Harris's father is a smart guy. And we all know now, I think this came out over the weekend, Kamala Harris's secret has been revealed. Her Jamaican ancestors, just her great-grandmother, were plantation slave owners. So does this mean the Democrat Party is all discredited and delegitimized? Well, with the things that they say and the hypocrisy that they have and the double standards that they ask for, they should have been discredited years ago. Police unlawfully reject a recruit for being a straight white male. That Jesse Smollett sent a letter to himself that you will die black faggot, unquote. That was his quote. Antifa video, staging rallies to ambush conservatives. Everything is fake news. Everything. Everything is theater. Everything is propaganda. And this is why when I do these economic 101 updates, Vince, I do it for the little guy, the bottom 93% of the people who has no protection under the law. Zero. And people need to realize there's a statistically manipulated economy, and then there's the people's reality economy. In other words, there's two different subsets. One's for the bottom 93%, and then the rest for the top 7% of the wealthy. So if it's okay with you, Vince, is it okay if I go into it? I'll be as quick as possible. I went
sure.
over this.
No. Take your time. Go into it as much detail as you'd like.
Okay, I appreciate it. I always appreciate, Vince, you allow me to exercise my First Amendment rights for the people. So I read a lot of hours per day of economists and traders, okay? And sometimes if I read a whole article it could be 10, 11 pages long, I might glean 2-3 sentences from it. So I'm just going to give you as many high points as possible. And what I try and do is to say as little as possible to give you the correct context and dovetail financial, economic, social, and political rationale together so you can see why the elite are doing what they are. Because it's smoke and mirrors. It's all an illusion. So, you just look at some of the statistics, like by 2032, this is a recent article, more people will be on retirement than actual workers regarding pensions. And this is especially the case in the context what in this article was about mostly government workers. It's just math. So we hear all this about a strong economy. We hear a lot of the mainstream media and the talking heads hanging things on specific things like China talks or tariffs or this or, we don't know what goes on behind closed doors. We have to remember that. I can give you so much advice that's 180 degrees from traders and economists on so many issues. I'm going to talk about some of that. Now, some more data. U.S. Treasury to borrow $1 trillion for the second year to finance our deficit. Now, when I say a lot of these statistics, I want you all to think about the propaganda behind the so-called strong economy. Okay? Now, don't get me wrong. I'm for Trump. Before he was elected, I went on every radio station in America and tried to stump for him. However, I'm also critical of him. And I've been critical of him regarding the tax cuts because the big corporations got so many billion-dollar tax cuts. I've been critical with a lot of him adding to the swamp. Now, he certainly has gotten rid of a lot of the swamp over the last couple of years. But there's just a lot of questions. It's just like William Barr. He was connected to Ruby Ridge defending FBI snipers. I've mentioned Wilbur Ross, Larry Kudlow, Steve Munchin, John Bolton. They're basically owned by the Rothschilds, the New York Fed, Goldman Sachs, the CFR, Council of Foreign Relations. I mean, there is a lot of questions out there. But I think Trump is taking a lot of heat. I think he's trying to bring back manufacturing. But one thing that I don't like is how they can press buttons and manufacture QE or quantitative easing or money or whatever you want to call it out of thin air. And it goes to the super wealthy, mostly for liquidity for Wall Street and the banks. And then the little guy has to work for it when the super wealthy guys don't even have to work for it. And that's why I quote Ayn Rand on occasion. Okay, moving on. The economy, I mentioned this about a month ago. You remember December, how everything was starting to crash? Well, it's because interest rates were going up. So we live in this so-called great strong economy, but they can't handle 3% rates. They can't handle 3.5% unemployment and a 3% plus annualized growth, which a lot of this is creative accounting and the changing of the unit of measures and calculations. Now, the reason why people say, well, why aren't the so-called Democrats using this data? Because a lot of this data that has been recalculated and unit of measures changed was done during the Obama administration. Obama used the same unit of measures that Trump is. So everything can be, especially if there's too many people who think that happiness is associated with the stock market and the so-called bull market. It's all manipulated. Happiness for the bottom 93% is being out of debt and having a healthy savings account. Of course, there are other criteria for happiness, but those are the two big ones. Okay, look at January growth numbers. The number one category gain was leisure and hospitality, hiring basically restaurants, bars, and casinos. But at the same time, if you look at restaurant numbers, everything's slipping. And you look at inventory supplies in a lot of industries, they're going higher. So what does that mean? So that means people aren't buying. And when they buy, they're buying mostly on credit cards. And what happens? Their savings goes down and their debt goes up. So they're so highly leveraged to keep whatever lifestyle they have, mostly of necessities. How long do you expect an unsustainable system to continue at this rate? GM to lay off 4,000 workers. $4 trillion in stock buybacks over the last 10 years. Now, that's stock manipulation a la carte. And I've talked about stock manipulation. Unless I have a question that comes in today, I've talked for hours, and Vince, you can agree, on quantitative easing and stock manipulation and how it all favors the super wealthy. But I'm going to move on to more data. Baltic Dry Index collapsing over the last few weeks. And right now, banks do not want to lend to consumers. if you look at statistics year over year, especially going into a recession, these behaviors usually happen during or before a recession. Now, next, through 2019, equities have gone up, yet dollar flow or money flow is rapidly leaving equities. So what does that tell you? It tells you the system's rigged. All the bailouts go to the rich. It's all manipulated. It's all fake. How can the Dow be up 9 weeks in a row and the S&P 500 be at the best start since 1987 when earnings are crap? Profits, same thing. Macro data, core business models. We have literally left business models, corporation business models, to feather the nest of the wealthy. Fundamentals, stock buybacks, velocity of money, all debt.
Yeah, well, I thought. We'll be right back. Just a quick update. I just got an email from Joel Skousen, and he's going to be on with us on the 8th. That would be, the 8th of next month. And we're going to be talking about solar systems. We're going to be talking about how to silence your generator so your neighbors won't hear you. Very clever ways of doing that. That will be on the 8th of March. Rich Scheben, we've been talking about liars. We've been talking about politicians. We've been talking about the misinformation, disinformation, the deep state. Please continue.
Well, thank you, sir. What I'm doing, folks, I'm trying to give an Economic 101 update, and I'm trying to incorporate financial, economic, social, and political rationale together. So the people, the little people who don't get the correct information, they get the manipulated information, the propagandized false flags, can put things in perspective and possibly make certain decisions on their life on where to go. So I was talking about when you look at all the fundamentals, earnings, profit, macro data, velocity of money, the debt, 80% of Americans living paycheck to paycheck, the Philadelphia Fed Manufacturing Index, it's all crap. It's all made up. It's all lousy, and all these numbers are manipulated. So just look at corporate buybacks, 78% higher compared to 2018, surpassing $1 trillion. This has nothing to do with supply and demand and free markets. It's all about feathering the nest of the CEOs and the elites of those corporations. So basically that eliminates money going into employees, into research and development, into supplies, into inventory, into goods and services. So it basically, in a sense, indirectly manufactures fake inflation, which who takes it in the shorts? The little guy. So let me move on to more. I'm not in the prediction business, okay? My crystal ball broke a long time ago. Now, a lot of the updates I've given based on the data from the Fed, the data from economists and traders. They were talking about quantitative tightening, balance sheet reductions, all this stuff. It looks like, from what I'm seeing of late, is that we have a higher probability now of going back to quantitative easing. So when the QE prints money out of thin air, they use that money to buy treasury bonds and hard assets like equities, which equities shouldn't even be considered a hard asset. Some people do, some people don't. But what this will probably eventually do is lower yields, or at least keep them to where they are. Now, some people refer to yields as interest rates or bonds, but they're all really the same if you look at it from that perspective. So what's going to happen to real estate? Typically, what has happened when QE inflates assets, real estate goes up. But we're also seeing a little bit of supply and demand take place where the little guy can't afford to take the risk. But you got to also ask yourself, what if the dollar goes down? I'm going to talk about that in a moment. When I say goes down, loses value. If the little guy was to purchase real estate, could a 30-year mortgage be an advantage because they could pay back that mortgage in basically what I call chicken feed because the dollar has changed value or currencies have changed. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. So what happens to the bottom 93%? Because everything that when I talk about this, I'm not bought and paid for, okay? I'm not owned. I'm trying to help protect the little guy, because the little guy has no protection, has no rights, and has no restitution under the law. So when the little guy tries to sell their property, for example, because most of the so-called middle class, what's left, have their value in their home. So where do you put that money? Okay? The successful economy, when does QE forever fail? Just like a drug addict. They need a higher dose, but less results next time. And I'll continue after the break, Vince.
I'm really glad you brought this point up, because this deserves some more discussion for many reasons, class. When we talk about how this will impact you, you may not have fully thought it out. We're going to help flesh out those details. We come back right after top of the hour news and commercial announcements. Rich Sheben's with us, offgridmontana.com. And I know you think that your house is your biggest investment. We're going to talk about what this really means when we come back. Everyone all set? Cocked, locked. Hour number 2 of USA Prepares. Rich Sheben's with us. Class, I just want to let you know that during the breaks, each commercial break, I'm working. And I just got off the phone with Craig Douglas, USA Prepares instructor. He travels gun shows and preparedness shows. He's going to be on with us on Friday, hour number 2. And my question for Craig Douglas is tied to what we talked about this morning. When I talked about the gun show that I went to, where is everybody? Where are the sellers? Where are the buyers? Where's the inventory? What's going on? He just told me that the shows are down. Not many shows scheduled for 2019. That means that business is down in the gun show area. That explains why there's so little inventory. That explains why there are so few sales. That explains why there's so little traffic. It's down. And he's going to share with us exactly what he found to be the case, because he goes to a lot of shows. That's what Craig Douglas of USA Prepares does. Rich Sheben's with us, and Robert in Kansas is calling in. Robert, welcome.
Hey, thank you, Vincent. You were talking about chemtrails earlier. That's some serious stuff. Are you going to start telling me we didn't land on the moon pretty soon? Also, is that the deal? Is that
if you'd like, I'll be glad to. I do not believe that we put a few guys up on a capsule on top of a rocket, blasted off, circled the moon, landed that capsule, walked around on the moon, got back in the capsule, blasted off, and came home.
And now you argue with Rich about it, huh?
Hey, don't throw my name in there. But I'll tell you something. I do wish, caller, that you would check out geoengineeringwatch.org, which is Dane Wigington, geoengineeringwatch.org. And he gives so much information about all the gag orders that have been bought and paid for from the scientists. And basically the fact that there's hundreds of patents on controlling weather. And even the Monsantos of the world, believe it or not, have it. And, there is a lot of evidence that comes out of people who have left the CDC, who have talked about the aluminum and all the things in the so-called chemtrails. But why is there gag orders? Why is Alzheimer's and dementia going up? I mean, we can blame a lot of this to the vaccines, of course, but weather manipulation companies or patents are owned by the Monsantos and the Rothschilds of the world. And he gives evidence of this. So if things were about truth, there wouldn't be gag orders and there wouldn't be scientists bought and paid for, and the other scientists who give other information, all their information being drowned. So there's no legitimacy or credibility in the so-called experts and official authorities if they are bought and paid for.
Rich Sheben?
Rich, I totally agree.
I just want to let you know, Rich Scheben, that Robert in Kansas is a USA preparedness instructor. He's fully on board with us, and that we're all on the same page.
Yeah, and I've heard Robert before. He's very well informed. And I just wanted to throw in my 2 cents there because when the so-called climate change proponents talk about how it's all the people's fault, but yet they don't have the Indias and the Chinas of the world conducting under the same restraints, and yet all the super wealthy people are flying around in their jets and have their 5-10 houses around the country, around the world, which are 5-10,000 square feet, if not bigger, and their carbon footprint is about 1,000 or 1,000,000 times the average person. But yet there's so much urgency about creating carbon taxes against the little people, but yet there's no urgency against the big people who are pushing this to change their behaviors.
You're absolutely right, Rich. That's why I'm calling in whenever you're on, because I enjoy the conversation and I enjoy Vincent and you guys. I know you disagree, but you're just so honest, and you can't do better than that. It's just a will towards the truth, regardless if you know it or not. At least you're trying to look for it. And yeah, I believe it was 2017. The government or whoever, right, academia, they came out and they said that solar radiation management was a tool they had, and they were going to start to employ it. And so, in some ways, they're covering they've been doing it for however long, right? But now they're saying that, oh yeah, we're going to block the sun because the Earth is getting warm. And I'm sitting there thinking, well, yeah, I mean, of course, that's what I would do. What does the sun really do for us anyway, right? Let's block the sun. Makes perfect sense. We shouldn't deal with the problem that's occurring. Let's just apply this bandage of blocking the sun, right? And so, yeah, it's amazing, Rich. It really is, and I can't believe this is the world we live in. Yeah,
and you know the irony of it all,
Robert.
Because I live off grid.
Let's go to a slightly. Am I disconnected? I just got disconnected for a second. Looks like I'm back.
No, I hear you, Vince. And Vince, if it's okay with you, as soon as Robert's done, I would like to continue my Economic 101 update to put things in context, please.
Sure. Robert, here's the question, and I think the class really needs to know about this. So in Europe, if you think about before World War II, before we bombed Germany to smithereens, and before Germany bombed England to smithereens, there are these beautiful old stone houses that people lived in, and they were lived in for generation after generation after generation with the same families, which is kind of a wonderful thing. Well, in the United States, that's not quite the case. We seem to think that housing is kind of a temporary thing, but we think it's so good because we can put money into it and pay for a 30-year mortgage, and at the end of that, we'll have some value, some equity built up. But the question that Rich and I have been talking about off the air is, what happens with the millennials who have very little home ownership, and they're the ones who would be buying the houses and properties that we'd be selling? Now, in my case, I bought a farm that was neglected, and our family has been working on it, making it better. Theoretically, it should be worth more than it was when we bought it because it's a way better farm now. But who would buy it? I don't think there's a single person who would want to buy the farm that we built up. Do you have a comment on that, Robert in Kansas?
It's probably too nice now, Vince. You were talking about flat fields without rocks and weeds before, and I guess that's the difference in understanding economic value and financial, accounting. I'm an economics guy. I'm a finance guy, and I'm along the same sort of education line as you guys. And so I would love to talk about economy and what that with Rich and where that's going and things like that. But yeah, Vince, it's the situation we're in. Earlier, Rich said he didn't want to. He wanted to, say that I really appreciate this. He said the elders are failing the youth. And so he, in a way, that's why I love the dynamic of your conversation, because, Vincent, you're right. You talk about Menard syndrome, and you're talking about this generation or generations. And then at the same time, Rich is like, well, but what are we doing? I mean, whose fault is that, right? And so that level of responsibility, that's a great conversation because you're both right, and that's why it's so hard to really, that's why you can talk about it forever because it's like a lot of things that you guys disagree on, like the police, so many topics. I enjoy it so much because you're both right. You can't really get around it because you're both right. And so, that's a lot of things. But yeah, I have some questions and some comments and other stuff like that. But Rich, I would love to talk economy with you and what's going on.
Well, absolutely, Robert. If it's okay with you, I can continue with my monologue, and after I'm done, you can let me know what you think. Because the problem is I have so much data, and what I try and do, Robert, is try to put it in the context where it's going to benefit the little people, so they can see basically the phoniness behind the scenes. And it's like when you said that the old people have failed the little people, I really put it in the context of that we need to get back to our mentor-protege relationships, because we're not teaching the balance of older skills to the youth. And I always put it in the context of relearning the lost 19th century skills, but dovetailing them with 21st century technology, kind of like how I live here on my hobby farm, if you will, with solar power. So if I can go back to that, Vince and Rob, are you guys okay with it? And then you can jump in at the end.
Yeah, please do.
Thank you.
We'll jump in at the end.
I want to talk about right now where the value is. And think about little guy protection. Think about manipulated economy. Think about, is this really a strong economy? Think about if the economy is really run by the people or the central banks and Keynesian economics. So where is the value? So when you sell a piece of property or sell anything or you come into cash, where do you put it? Because you have to really ask yourself, in even this financial theater, this economy that we're in, everything is made to make the little people or the middle class feel wealthier. And that's basically what Keynesian economics is. They believe they can create a higher economy by changing the money supply. They don't have any accountability. It's all elite control and corruption from the top down, where deficits don't matter. GDP is everything, which you've heard me say a million times. It does not equate to happiness. It's elite interventionism, print, inflate, buy now and pay later. So it's all tweaking for the benefit of keeping the status quo and maintaining a caste system. So I want you all to think about where we're going. And it's going to be a big question mark, and I'm doing this purposely. Are we going to go to an SDR, special drawing rights, which is a basket of fiat currencies monitored by the corrupt IMS or Bank for International Settlements? When they imply that they're institutions of virtue for the people, after I'm done laughing and then throwing up, that's when I address it, because it's all a big scam. Are we going to go to
all right, going into a break?
Is a Federal Reserve
Hold the thought. And Kansas is with us, both USA preparedness instructors, and we're talking about economics and the relevance to you right now. Rich Scheben, please continue.
Well, thank you, Vince. So there's a lot of talk these days about the Federal Reserve note, and will it continue, or will we go to a Treasury note? Will we continue with the world reserve currency? Are we going to continue to print into oblivion, and what's going to happen to our value? Right now, international money, the U.S. dollar is at least 60% of currency. So we have to figure, if we lose the world reserve currency, the value, how can the U.S. dollar go up under these circumstances, especially with our debt and deficit issues? It probably can't. It's got to go down. Are we going to continue debt monetization? Or what about foreign investment into our debt/bonds? I see it going down. Are we going to have an international dollar and a domestic dollar? I see so many people talking about gold and silver-backed currency. It's not a bad idea, but we're entering an era of robotics, automation, artificial intelligence taking millions of jobs. So we got to look at value and how it affects the little guy. Now, you got to remember, gold and silver has been the most manipulated and fraudulent manipulation and corruption in the pricing market, in the commodities market. So how much gold does the U.S. have? Do we really have gold in Fort Knox or in the Grand Canyon? Are we going to have audits? We haven't had audits on the Fed. How can we expect audits on gold? Because we're going to believe what the mainstream media says? I don't think so. Is it going to be gold-plated tungsten? How do we know? When we have a system where there's so many paper receipts and leverage off the charts, where we have a 300 to 1, when you look at the crooked COMEX, we have 300 to 1 leverage possibly on paper and gold. So as long as we have paper, there's always going to be naked shorts in every context. How about crypto? Is it going to be decentralized or centralized? If it's centralized, top-down corruption with no accountability, forget about it. It's going to be worthless to the people. How do we know if cryptocurrencies don't have backdoor monitoring and theft by the powers that be? How about the value in a job? With victim group status and identity group politics, if proven results and qualifications no longer matter, it only matters what group you're from, there's no incentives, there's no dignity, and there's no value in work, it's been practically eliminated. We can't continue to lower the bars of standards and expectations for a job because we eliminate opportunities based mostly on color of skin, gender, sexual orientation, nepotism, connections, and for the elite. So the bottom 93%, who are they going to sell to if buyers become non-existent and they have no protection of rights or restitution under the law? And you throw in Keynesian economics and demographics into this picture, where the greatest growth through 2050 is going to be the old people. And have you seen the 2018 retail numbers for December and store closings? It's through the roof. So when you look at the uncertainty, the corruption, manipulation, the leveraged economy, and if you're a proponent of the rule of law, of common sense logic, of truth, of objective facts versus subjective emotional opinions, if you're a proponent of free speech and having the same rules, laws, and accountability for everybody, if you're a proponent of supply and demand free markets, you get labeled as a racist, bigot, sexist, misogynist, homophobe, conspiracy theorist. So, and then you get demonetized. So as the elite keep changing words, meanings of words from the economy to common household traditions and heritage, it's very difficult for an economy to thrive under phony conditions. So people have to realize it's the aristocracy, basically anti-American people, versus the serfs who are mostly patriots. There's very little left and right paradigm. Look at the last bill that President Trump signed. And it wouldn't even have passed if it wasn't for the Republicans. We got to get rid, in our minds, of the left-right paradigm. Too many people have been compromised, whether it be through pedophilia, money laundering, some type of criminal activity. They're only feathering their own nest. They do not care about the people. We have to get that in our minds. So when you basically look at financial, economic, social, and political dots that need to be connected in an environment where the mainstream media is owned by the elites, continue without accountability to promote propaganda, lies, false flags, divide and conquer strategy against the people to cover up wealth accumulation and wealth distribution from the bottom 93% to the elite. Look at home sales. Home sales is dropping like a rock right now. And this is why I talk about QE for the people.
All right, we're going into a break. We'll be... Rich Sheben's with us, offgridmontana.com. Robert in Kansas is with us. Rich, please continue.
All right, just have a couple more minutes, gentlemen. I'm going to shortcut this. So I last left at, and by the way, Vince, I have a hard time hearing the music when I'm on speakerphone here. But anyway, the home sales are dropping like a rock in America, and that's why one of the reasons I think interest rates will probably go down or at least stay stagnant and not go up. Because if interest rates go up, everything collapses. Stocks, bonds, housing. Real estate, especially commercial retail, is hanging on by their nails. Emerging markets, interest in our debt. I mean, if interest rates go up, I don't think they can go up under this present system that we're in of Keynesian economics and corrupt monetary policies from the central banks. But that being said, when you look at central banks and Keynesian economics, they're right now fighting for legitimacy. They're fighting for credibility. The elite needs to keep the Ponzi scheme going. We will see an increased amount of lies, false flags, and propaganda, and more distractions, dumbing down, and division of America. Corruption and manipulation is directly proportional to the amount of noise and propaganda and lies that comes to have an objective of distracting, dumbing down, and dividing the American people. We're going to see more dumb ideas, especially if they can distract and divide the people at the same time. To put it in a different way, we're going to see much more effort and legislation and policies to maintain the status quo. Some examples would be trust fund babies, nepotism, multi-million-dollar inheritance, and maintaining the caste system, which is fleecing the little guy. Addition to the addiction of power, money, and control, the police state increasing, and the fascist system that Trump inherited. So we're going to continue to see a different tiered system of different rules, laws, and accountability for victim groups or protectionist groups, which are protectionist groups are the big corporations and the elite under this particular system. So as the middle class gets crushed, we have to ask ourselves, what's going to hold value? What unit of measure is going to be used? And this is one of the reasons that Vince and I always talk about living off-grid, being self-sufficient, growing our own food, maybe raising animals, maybe hunting and fishing, maybe having a solar array, maybe introducing frugality into your life and not paying for anything unless it's cash. You know, if you guys want to buy a little gold and silver, if you want to delve into the stock market and buy some stocks and bonds, I always say go ahead and do it. But remember, it's gambling. You're not going to get a free drink and a pretty girl delivering it to you like Vegas. But other than that, it's pretty much the same. The only thing I avoid, or try to avoid, are words like debt, leverage, margin. So when I see housing going down and millennials not buying houses, I definitely understand why. But I'm a big proponent of building or living in a little house. Like here in western Montana, we have these construction guys who are building little houses all over the place, and they're renting parking lots and putting little houses, little cabins, guest cabins, garages, shops, and they can be transported. I mean, it's so easy for somebody to buy something $8,000 and put it on a piece of land and live there and buy 20 acres and put money into tangibility where they can be free, put a little wood stove in it and have a great life and learn skill sets, because the two youngest generations have been cultivated and groomed with technology. They have no skill sets. They're spending tons of money on college, coming out in high debt, and with leverage up to their eyeballs, and they got to rent for years, which is basically, that's code talk for throwing money out the window and not putting money into equity or principal or your own pocket, and they're not getting ahead. So they're missing out on time leverage by buying early, and they're missing out on gaining skill sets by living a certain lifestyle because they're being herded into the cities with tons of debt. So I'm asking the little guy to start thinking outside the box and thinking about what's going to have value. And there's a lot of ambiguity because of the corruption and manipulation. But the best value for today, in my opinion, is yourself. And that's not a college education. That's building skill sets. If you want to make money, go into the trades. Become an electrician and learn how to dovetail that with off-grid living. You know, learn skill sets, not electives and going into college and coming out of, $150,000 in debt. That's just stupid, because college is an industry for social indoctrination. It actually makes you dumber. It's a waste of money. So I'm asking everybody, especially young people who feel like there's so much despair and they're giving up and they can't do it, can't pull it off. 90% of people live in urban, suburban America. How about if we decentralized and went rural? In whatever state you want to be in. It doesn't have to be Missouri, doesn't have to be Montana, it can be anywhere. And maybe lived off-grid, maybe started growing your own food, maybe started thinking outside the box, maybe do it with other people. And basically take those capital resources and hedge your bets and do it with family and friends who have different skill sets and cross-train one another. It's a great life because with all the ambiguity of where we're going for value of so-called money, it's very uncertain, and the little guy doesn't get the inside skinny before the corrupt big guys. So we have to start thinking differently. All right, gentlemen, I tried to shortcut that. It's all yours.
Just one quick comment, and I'd love to hear what Robert has to say, but I know Robert wants to know the answer to this.
I'm ready.
So we asked on USA Prepares, while there was some interest in having an expo, I've gotten some emails, some calls. Hey, when's the next expo? We'd love to have an expo, even calls on the air. And I said, well, if we had an expo, it would have to be one where no one brought cell phones. You'd have to leave your cell phones home because we don't want all cell phones converging on our expo. And I said, if we had 100 people who responded to instructor at USA Prepares, I would be surprised. Well, I have the number. We've let it go for over a week, and I have not announced it every day, but we have let it go for over a week. 9, N-I-N-E. About half are instructors. Robert, you're on the list. Rich Scheben, you're on the list. At least 7 more, okay? If you don't count me. 9 people are interested. So I don't think we're going to have one. Because not enough people. Now, we might have, we'll get together with just, us. But if only 9 people are interested in having an expo and they're willing to leave their cell phones at home, I'm not interested in doing it. Robert, you've got the floor.
Oh, thanks, Vince. I would almost drive to Montana to meet Rich and see his farm, but if he was in Missouri, I would definitely make the drive. That'd be easy. But I want to say to everything that you said there, Rich, which was great, is that we just need UBI. And I know you don't want to hear that, but it's one thing that would be fair. We could get rid of welfare, and we could do a lot of things. We could outlaw homelessness, and we could give people who work, who do a good job every day, they also would benefit from it. And so it is actually fair compared to a welfare system and a lot of socialist things we have now. I wanted to say, as far as printing money and the what is the value of money rest on, as long as we maintain, Rich already said it, he basically said we have a world currency status. And if we can maintain that, some people would call it the petrodollar. And you may think of a lot of military conflicts surrounding that idea, and that's really what it is. You want to know what backs up the U.S. dollar? It's the fact we can export inflation, and if you don't do what we say, we'll come bop you on the head. And so that's really what it is. I love your plan, Rich. You talk about your QE for the people. And I really like the idea. I just call it UBI, and I know that the beer money thing. And the problem with these ideas is you're not wrong either. like I said before, it's not like you're wrong about it either. But I don't understand the negative interest rate component. Can you talk about negative interest rates and just help me understand that? Because I don't think I understand that really, how that really works.
Absolutely, I'd love to, Robert. And those are all very good points. And I guess UBI, the reason why, I talk about QE for the people, which has like 10 different criteria. UBI for the people basically implies like helicopter money. Everybody gets $1,000 a month, which is basically beer money. What it does, it disincentivizes the person and maintains the caste system. In other words, it's going to be very difficult for a person to get out of that system because either they're going to get too lazy, they're not going to want to be, or supply and demand has decreased to a point, and inflation has increased to a point. Possibly UBI could bring in hyperinflation. So when you start throwing around free money, that goes into the question of value, and that's what I spent some time on today. Now, when I talk about QE for the people, okay, what basically the elite has had with stock buybacks and QE, it's basically been UBI for the elite. In fact, I call it UBL, Universal Basic Luxury. In other words, the elite have gotten QE from the bottom 93% for their luxury in the forms of oligarchies, monopolies, the big government system protecting big corporations, and all the money going from the little guy. Like QE, I've said many times, is liquidity for the banks and Wall Street. So basically, the big guys have been bailed out, too big to fail and too big to jail, while the little guys are hoping to get some manufacturing job just to stay afloat. So this is why I stick up for the little guy, because they're being screwed. And I would love, when I talk about negative interest rates, I talk about it because we are in the context, Robert, we are in a stagflationary, and I hear music this time, we're in a stagflationary, deflationary spiral. And I'll answer your question in more detail after the break, Robert.
I agree.
Yeah, just a quick note that you mentioned beer money. Just about every beer tested in a test recently contained glyphosate, and many wines as well. Quick update. I posted a link about beer and pesticides and insecticides and contaminants and disease at usaprepares.com. Most beers now contain traces of glyphosate and pesticides. And one other announcement. Guineith Isaacs' newsletter is linked at usaprepares.com, page number 1. Subscription is $10 a month, and there's 4 issues per month. So if you'd like to subscribe or learn more about it, just go to usaprepares.com, page number 1. There's the link. Guineith will be with us tomorrow. Rich, back to you.
Well, thank you, sir. Now, keep in mind, Robert, that what the banks have created a system where credit is now collapsing. They've been using fractional reserve lending, overusing it for years. Credit card rates are shot through the moon, but yet they continue to get bailed out by the people. So if we do this QE for the people, it's basically a light at the end of the tunnel program, and rewarding the people for paying their debts instead of making people go bankrupt, lose their property, and rewarding debt for the too big to fail and too big to jail. So if we
wouldn't UBI help that though?
But if first of all, we have to admit to, we don't want to create inflation. We need to admit to the stagflation and deflation that we have because of demographics and the whole system that I talk about all the time.
Yeah.
So if we allow negative interest rates to occur and we had means testing situations to get the wealthy out of the benefit packages, maybe we increased mortgages to maybe 100 years and had laws of excess, and we take the mean household debt and give it to each people in the form of some type of QE or UBI, whatever you talk about. We dismantle the central banks and eliminate debt-based currencies, audit the Fed. We have to not allow the elite to keep using terms like class envy, because we are literally printing money and giving it to them. It's not class envy, it's corruption, it's manipulation, it's nepotism. That's what's going on. So if we had QE for the people, we could take those negative interest rates, and at the end of, say, we had negative 3% interest rate, at the end of that fiscal year or calendar year, depending on when they took out their mortgage or whatever, they get paid that 3% for basically keeping their nose clean from crime and doing the right thing, which is paying off their mortgage. And it gives people a chance. And then it's going to give the older generation a supply and demand base where there's going to be more younger people buying houses. We're going into a system where the young are having a hard time being allowed to buy a home or equity or land, and they don't want to go into debt.
You don't think that would drive up real estate prices?
I think
your plan would drive it. Okay. It would be great for real estate.
Would raise real estate prices a little bit, but give the older people a chance to sell for retirement, where 9 out of 10 old people are going to be going bankrupt. And I've read this over the next 10 years. but it's going to most importantly give the young people an ability to buy a home and get.
Oh, so I can get a loan. I can get a loan for a home as a young person. I can get a loan for a negative interest rate loan. Doesn't that require a willing lender?
No. Negative. We have to use the banks in the system because they've been bailed out for years. Now they got to bail out the little people. See, this is what my idea is all about. And of course, I can't put it in context in this short amount of time. Vince, I'm going to have to spend probably an hour talking about this. But if we do this idea, we can literally allow negative interest rates, because even if we went to a negative interest rate, we're in negative real interest rates right now, Robert. But if we went into official negative interest rates where the short end of the yield curve inverted with the long end of the yield curve, under the present system, the banks would never allow basically money back in it. If we had, say, 3% negative interest rates, they would never allow that money to go from the banks to the people because they're greedy. They've been bailed out. This system would allow the little people to actually be rewarded for paying off their mortgage, and there's a 10-step plan here. It's not just throwing helicopter money out the window. That's
Rich, here's what you have to do. Next time you're on, why don't you go through the entire 10 steps? What do you think, Robert?
I've heard all the steps. I just, there will be inflation, but that's good for you, Vincent. You're a producer.
Well, in some ways, yes. I'd rather not have inflation.
Well, your channels are going to go up.
Yeah, that'd be wonderful. Because right now